What's up guys? So in this video I'm going to be breaking down probably one of my favorite instrumentals that I've made in a while, and the difference here is I want to show you how to actually create tracks for artists. There's some key elements that you need to focus on when you have a rapper or singer in mind, and some ways to make that artist gravitate towards what you've created. So I'm going to break down this project, which is actually something that was a bit new for me. It's a demo for an artist I'm working with. And also, if you are a producer who's currently feeling stuck or trying to get somewhere in your music production, whether that's to improve your mixing, your arrangement, compositional skills, or even the brand and networking side of being a producer, you can book a free half-an-hour call down below to help you get to where you're trying to go to much quicker. Here's the intro. So off the bat, this track just has those drums that just give you this driving kind of rhythm, and the synth just sits so nicely on top whilst leaving space for the artist, and I'll explain how I've done that. So if you're working with an artist, what's really helpful is to get references of what they actually want from you. Of course, there's going to be artists who might really fall in love with your style and the kind of beats or tracks that you make, but if they're working on a project or an album, find out what the reference tracks are. Not to say you just want to copy a different song, but it gives you an idea and direction of where to go to, because you could be producing anything, and if you're like myself, you can spend many hours if not days on tracks and it can all be for nothing. So this artist gave me a song that had this kind of distorted like bass guitar sound, and I went and found this sample and I did a bunch of chopping, stretched it, I just sound pitched it down 4 semitones. I added a bit of reverb, a bit of this fuzz droid distortion effect from Sketch Audio, and I've cut out some of the low end just because I have this thumping kick drum which comes from the drums, which I'll show you. And off the bat, this is a key consideration you can take for your projects if you're producing for artists, and that is that the vocals normally sit around this 1K mark. So oftentimes I will duck that portion either with a multi-band compressor or an EQ. Now, I don't just do it as a rule because there's no rules in music. You've got to use your ears, but this happened to sound a lot more open and spacious for an artist or for vocals on it, as well as when some of the other elements come into it. This actually sounded good to me. Not to mention, it's also kind of where the snare drum lives when it comes to the drum, so it just helps give it a bit more pop and impact and emphasis when you have, for example, like on this track, a big 80s style like reverb snare, so just help that as well. And anyway, so this is what it sounded like. For reference, this is what it originally sounded like. Keep in mind, I've still stretched it to match the tempo, but without any plugins and the original file. So it's kind of similar, but again, like I chopped it in a way that I liked. And then I just had this percussive loop, which I'd also chopped up and done a similar thing. One thing to consider is that you don't just want to pitch your melodic instruments, the pianos, the guitars, the vocals. Pitch your drums, pitch your percussion, because you'll find that they sit better in certain ranges or different keys. You know, obviously like basses and 808s are a bit more obvious, but even when it comes to things like triangles, shakers, tambourines, mess around with the pitch. I can pretty much guarantee you that they'll sit better in certain keys than others. So this is what it sounded like. You know, stylistically, that 80s kind of pop sound has a lot of reverbs, a lot of delays. We've also got this reversed bass here, which sounds like this. So it's very subtle, but just having little rises like that, not even taking traditional rises, but just sounds that you might already have, like a bass or even an 808 or a hi-hat, and just simply reversing it, putting a fade on it can create really nice cohesive rises because it's also a sound or congruent with your current project, because we've already heard the sound, right? So, and the other thing I always love to do is add some sort of ambience. Usually this fits on most projects, and I think it just is such an easy and fast way to add depth and realism. So I just have this kind of like ambience from like, well, apparently Japan, and it's like a busy street, you know, like the percussion. I still messed with the pitch of this ambient sound. I've pitched it down 3. I've added some panning, so it's moving around in the background, bunch of reverb, and then even just ducking certain elements, cutting out the lows, and then we get this. And then combined with this one, which is just some people talking that I'd also chopped up. And so listen to the difference now when you couple that with the bass. Compared to, like, there's just so much more silence, and it's really subtle, but also not at the same time. So depending on the artist you're working with, maybe not so much in like a lot of rap songs, but I just find there's often so much room for these ambiences, which I think just give a track so much more life than just sounding very like digital. And so now going into the next section, we even have this little like DJ scratch that I added, which I just thought worked as like a fill to the next section. So the main thing here now is the drums. Now this was really interesting because I kind of paired 2 different drum loops. Again, I'd like chop them slightly. This is without any processing, this one. And all I did was added a little bit of reverb and EQ'd out the lows, so I didn't want the kick drum. I just wanted the snare because the next drum loop is where I really wanted the kick from. So you're basically just hearing from that snare onwards, and then now we've got this one. Oh, it just sounds so good. And then we've got this element here, which is also a different drum loop, but this one just has this delay on it, so it adds so much rhythm. So check this. On its own. Oh, but then as soon as you pair it together. Oof. And you'll see even here, like now I have it come in like multiple times, so. So a super easy way to add groove, and I've been doing this way more often now when it comes to my drums and percussion, is firstly not just having one simple drum loop if you are using samples, but if you are using samples or even different percussive elements that you're drawing in yourself with MIDI, then just having tracks like this where there's a bunch of delay and it's just a short rhythm or like a few notes with delay. Listen to the difference without and then with the delay. So without, it still sounds cool, but like as soon as you add like a basic delay, and this is just the stock Logic delay, like it just adds more bounce, it adds such cool rhythm. And rhythm is going to be key for the artist, not to be like overwhelming and overshadowing where the artist should be, but that rhythm is going to give the artist this drive and these different pockets for how their lyrics are going to actually flow. So really, I wouldn't overlook like little percussive elements like that, because they can do a lot, not only for your own instrumental and track, but for the artist as well. And so now onto the backbone of the actual melody. My favorite part of this track, honestly, which I think just makes it so catchy, is this synth line. So this came from the Prophet 5 from Arturia, and it's the Prophet 0 preset. And I just messed around a bit with the cutoff, a little bit with the resonance, and and just the decay and attack and stuff. So sometimes plugins or VSTs like this can look quite overwhelming, but you're gonna get way better at knowing how to make sounds work in your tracks, because you might click a preset that you think doesn't sound good, but just by tweaking some of those parameters, you end up having great sound selection. So it's quite an essential skill, I would say, for a producer to just understand the basics. So then I just had this melody that just sat on top and it went like this. Number one difference and thing that you can also implement here as well is just having a melody and simply pitching it up an octave or down. But usually if you're crescendoing, you know, you're building the chorus up, it's a super easy way to do that, is just pitch it up an octave. And then the other thing to note here is how it doesn't just come in on the one. I have that pause and it hits right when the snare does, so check. Like that, I think, is just super interesting and just kind of stands out compared to. So the listener might be expecting that sound to just come in straight away, but just having that little gap there just adds a cool little bit of ear candy. And obviously one of the main things that you'll probably hear a lot of producers say, that when it comes to working with artists and songs for artists, you really want to make sure there's space for them. Like I said, you can technically do that by creating space in the frequency range for where the vocals would normally sit, you know, not filling it up and making it busy, overcomplicating your melodies. For example, this is a very simple melody. It's catchy to the point where you can easily sing it or even just play it on a keyboard with one finger. That's normally a good way of knowing that you have a simple, catchy melody. But my point is, because it can be so tempting to overproduce and want to flex your production skills, I think there's just like this maturity in finding these little pockets and moments of like just slipping in little bits of ear candy that are subtle, but like just noticeable enough. So for example, this DJ scratch again, if I just play these 3 tracks here, it's quite subtle, but it's literally just this sound. Super subtle, you probably don't even notice it, but I just have a bunch of these throughout the track. Anyway, going into the next section. Like I said, repetitive. You got to keep in mind that the artist is going to want to sing or spit a full verse, so give them the time to do that. Don't keep adding a bunch of fills, having 808s going everywhere just because you get bored. You want the artist to be able to sit into the track and just find that pocket, find that groove, and kind of almost be entranced by it or like hypnotized by it. That's often what I found in my experience, and from what I've learned, is that it's the simplest beats that get played. It's the simplest tracks and instrumentals. If you listen to the top songs that are on the Billboard charts, they're almost always very, very simple and repetitive. So again, if you just want to scratch that itch, then just find these little moments for like small ear candies or like the one big fill in the song, but just keep it repetitive, trust me. And then I just have those percussive elements with the delay, just adding that rhythm. And then here, just like a small gap signaling that, okay, it's the next section, which is where I have this bridge. And then I have this guitar come in. So obviously you want to kind of switch up. I mean, there are songs that are literally basically just verse, chorus. But I think it's always nice to have an option to have some kind of a bridge section or something where there's a bit of a switch up. Just gives them the option, and you can always remove it, or they can always remove it. I've loved this guitar preset that I use in Omnisphere, and it's the PRS lead guitar B. There's the guitar A and B, but just a bunch of reverb, bunch of delay. But yeah, I just found these chords and this kind of rhythm, and it just sat well with me. And then sure enough, I just took it and pitched it up an octave for this second half. So it just went like this. And with pretty much all my tracks and instruments, I try to never have everything just quantized to the grid. Always just having these imperfections, the things that are slightly off time, dragging, they just help add realism, groove, bounce, and just a human touch. So I think it's really nice to have those imperfections. It's truly what I think artists and listeners really strive for in a sense, is like to have an amazing song, but with that like edge, that kind of imperfection in it that just stands out and like calls to you, you know? And then we go straight back into the chorus, but with a new addition. So you might have noticed on that same synth lead from earlier, I just had this variation where basically went up, but I had some additional notes that were added. So it just sounded like this. It's just a nice bit of variation, especially since it's the second chorus. I think that's where you can add that, like, those little bits of ear candy where there's just like a bit of a turnaround or something a bit special, a bit new and novel. So it makes the track a bit more interesting and just less like copy paste. And then I have the guitar come in here. Really, I just played this in. I used the pitch wheel or the mod wheel, and I just got these cool modulations, and they just sounded like this. So if I just play it with the bass. And then really the cool like fill elements here that I have are just these like 80s like toms, and I'm pretty sure this is the exact same sample on each track, but what I've done is basically taken the same tom sample, so like the tom of a drum kit, that like real 80s reverb kind of like delay sound that, you know, we all love. Just having this fill that goes down. You'll have like the high tom, maybe a second rack tom, and then the floor tom, the really like deep low sounding one. So going from high to low, and I just replicated that by simply taking this, and then I pitched it down 5 and then pitched it down 7. So you can obviously experiment with different pitches of the drums, but that's just how I got this really cool, like simple, again, simple fill. And that delay, again, adds so much rhythm. Look, if I take away the delay, it's still nice, but you just lose like a little bit of that rhythm. And I also have this downer, which is actually reversed, so I've made it into a riser. Telling you, the delay on percussion and drums just adds so much rhythm. It's so easy. And the last key drum element I want to point out here is just having what's called an accent. So I've taken this impact sound and I've pitched one left, one right, and they just sound like this. So it's just like a big reverb clap sound. But what I'm doing here is accenting the drums because this is the chorus. Again, the second chorus, it should be even bigger than the first one. We're just accenting that downbeat, the snare. So. And then without. You know what I mean? It was just calling for that. It just like, there should have been some impact there. So that's what I added. And you can see I've actually tucked away a few of these accents throughout this whole track. So there's just these moments where I want that snare to be emphasized, and there's parts where I've only done it on one track, so it's a bit less emphasized and just like in the background, but still adding to the impact and the accent. And then I have like what I just played for you, and right at the end where it's just like 2 at once, so it's a lot more sound and impact. I just have this one last little bit of variation with a trick I want to show you. All I did here was took that same bass pattern and I just had slightly different plugins. So for example, this EQ, just cutting out all the high end, even some of the mids, and just making it a lot more subdued and subtle. So when you cut out that high end, you know it's going to build. So if you're making tracks for artists, chances are before a big chorus or before a big burst, which for the next section here, it's actually a verse, but it's just like helping the track breathe. You go from like this big chorus ending, and then so just contrasting it with sections where, you know, it lets the listener or the artist breathe. And so like I said, it's still very simple. It's basically the same main melody, but just this slight ear candy that I've created. And all I did was put it onto yet another track, where here I just pitched it up a full octave. I removed a lot of low end, still some of the high end, and then I just got this cool kind of texture. And then right at the end here, I just have it reversed and with a bunch of delays, so we get this. And then coupled with a riser here, it just layers really nicely. And also with a bell here, just on a ride cymbal, just to emphasize that drop. Again, we're accenting those moments that we want the impact to really stand out. Yeah, I have this fade, which basically is just a slow down effect. So it's just a simple way to end the track off, and with that reverse bass again, so they're almost kind of doing the opposite. So you just get this. So hopefully some of these tips helped, but also if you'd actually like to work with me one-on-one, where I'll listen to your projects, your tracks, or where you're currently at and trying to get to, and help you strategize and actually set systems and routines to make you progress much quicker. But now if you want to see me break down a more emotional, dreamy, atmospheric track that I made recently, you can watch this video right here. And until then, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.